The first sign was a number, not an explosion, not a warning klaxon, not a distress call cutting through static on the early morning Gulf watch. It was a number, 0.3 seconds. That was the processing lag detected in the SPY-1D radar array aboard a U.S. Navy guided missile cruiser assigned to escort a carrier strike group operating in the northern Persian Gulf. On the surface, 0.3 seconds means nothing. In a radar system designed to track over 200 simultaneous aerial contacts, to discriminate between a commercial airliner and an inbound anti-ship ballistic missile in real time, 0.3 seconds is an eternity. It is the difference between a clean missile intercept and a catastrophic hull strike. The technician who flagged it during a routine Aegis combat system diagnostic was 22 years old. He had been aboard the ship for 9 months. He had run this same diagnostic 64 times. He had never seen a number like that. He logged it. He reported it to his division officer. He went back to work. 3 hours later, his division officer was on a secure line to Naval Surface Warfare Center, Dahlgren Division, in Virginia. The call was not routed through normal fleet communication channels. It was placed on a compartmentalized line reserved for technical anomalies that could not be explained by standard troubleshooting procedures. The team at Dahlgren pulled the diagnostic log remotely. They ran their own analysis using a parallel Aegis baseline in their test facility. They reproduced the processing delay under simulated track saturation conditions. 14 minutes after the call from the Gulf, the lead systems engineer made one call. That call went directly to the Office of Naval Intelligence, Counterintelligence Directorate. What happened in the next 11 days would not appear in any press briefing. It would not be discussed in congressional testimony for over 2 years. What happened in those 11 days was, by any operational measure, one of the most precisely executed counterintelligence operations in the modern history of United States naval warfare. This is that operation. The SPY-1D phased array radar is the nerve center of an entire warship's defensive and offensive awareness. It tracks aircraft, surface contacts, and ballistic missile trajectories simultaneously. It feeds targeting data to the ship's 96-cell vertical launch system. It coordinates with other Aegis-equipped ships in a strike group to create a layered defensive picture across hundreds of nautical miles. When the SPY-1D is functioning within its specifications, a carrier strike group is one of the most defensively capable military formations ever assembled. When it is not functioning within specifications, that formation has a blind spot. And in naval warfare, blind spots are where ships die. The lag in the system was not mechanical. The engineers at Dahlgren confirmed that within 48 hours. The hardware was clean. The SPY-1D array showed no physical degradation, no component failure, no environmental interference signature that could account for the processing delay. The latency was not coming from the radar. It was coming from deeper inside the system, from the software layer that interfaces the radar feed with the Aegis baseline, the computational architecture that takes raw sensor data and translates it into actionable fire control solutions. Someone had modified that software. The modification was extraordinarily subtle. It was not a shutdown command. It was not a logic bomb designed to detonate at a specific time. It was a data prioritization reweighting buried inside a legitimate-looking software patch that had been pushed to the ship's Aegis system 14 weeks earlier as part of a scheduled maintenance update. The patch had been reviewed. It had passed every standard validation check. It had been digitally signed by the defense contractor responsible for Aegis software maintenance. It had been installed without a single flag. But it was not what it appeared to be. The reweighting logic was designed to do one specific thing. When the radar system was simultaneously tracking a high volume of contacts across multiple threat categories, precisely the condition that exists during a mass missile salvo attack, the modified code would introduce a subtle delay in the handoff of ballistic track data to the fire control processor. 0.3 seconds per update cycle. Under normal patrol conditions, tracking a handful of contacts, the lag was invisible. The system appeared to perform normally. The diagnostics looked clean. Under saturation attack conditions, tracking dozens of simultaneous inbound threats while the fire control system attempted to build intercept solutions for all of them at once, that lag would cascade through the entire engagement architecture. A percentage of incoming threats that should have been killed at maximum range, at the outer edge of the engagement envelope where intercept probability was highest, would instead slip past that outer layer. They would reach the inner defense. Some of them, under the right attack geometry, would not be stopped. The people who designed this modification had not tried to disable the Aegis system. They were too sophisticated for that. They had tried to degrade it precisely enough that it would fail under specific controlled conditions while appearing to function normally under all others. A system overwhelmed by an attack it was never quite designed to stop. Not sabotage. A tragedy that could be explained.
ONI pulled every record associated with the software patch. Contractor access logs going back 3 years, code repository version histories, digital signing certificate chains. The investigation moved through 6 contractor organizations before it found what it was looking for.
A single software engineer at a third-tier defense subcontractor in the Pacific Northwest had introduced the modified prioritization logic into the patch pipeline. He held a current secret security clearance. He had worked in Aegis software support for 4 years. His access to the code repository was entirely legitimate. His performance reviews were positive. His background investigation had found nothing of concern. His financial records showed a stable, normal profile. He was, on paper, exactly what he appeared to be.
Except for one thing.
11 months before the patch was deployed, the engineer had traveled to Dubai on what he logged as a personal vacation. His financial records showed normal activity before and after the trip. The analysts who pulled those records almost moved past the Dubai trip entirely. Then one analyst noticed something. 4 days after the engineer returned from Dubai, a series of small, irregular payments appeared flowing from a shell company registered in Cyprus to a technology consulting firm in Arizona. The payments were individually small enough to fall below standard financial monitoring thresholds, irregular in timing in a way that appeared random. The total, across 9 separate transactions over 14 months, was $87,400.
The consulting firm had one listed client, a technology advisory company registered in the British Virgin Islands with no publicly identifiable business activity. That company's corporate filings listed a single director whose name appeared on a Treasury Department OFAC watch list connected to procurement networks associated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Cyber Command. The money trail was thin. It had been designed to stay below detection thresholds for exactly as long as it needed to. But it was there. And once the analysts found the trail, they found everything behind it. The engineer had been recruited in Dubai. The payment structure had been designed to fund the operation without surfacing in any standard financial intelligence collection. The software modification had been the sole objective of the entire network. A single, precisely scoped act of technical sabotage embedded inside a legitimate contractor workflow, designed to activate not randomly, but at a specific moment of operational crisis that the IRGC intended to create and control. That moment was now 10 days away. SIGINT assets operating across the Gulf region had been tracking unusual encrypted communications between IRGC Navy command nodes and Iranian ballistic missile brigade headquarters in Khuzestan province for 3 weeks. The volume, timing, and routing patterns told a story that required no content decryption to read. Satellite imagery confirmed it. Fast attack craft repositioned to forward operating points. Coastal defense missile batteries reoriented toward the Gulf shipping lanes. A formation of Iranian frigates holding at sea within missile range of the Central Transit Corridor. Most significantly, 3 Kilo-class submarines had dropped out of the fleet tracking baseline. Their last confirmed positions placed them in the western Gulf of Oman, running quiet, running deep, running toward the Strait of Hormuz.
The operational picture was unambiguous. Iran was positioning for a coordinated multi-domain strike. The Kilo-class submarines would close within torpedo range of the carrier's screen. Fast attack craft would press from the north. 41 ballistic missiles from Khuzestan would arrive simultaneously from multiple vectors, timed to overwhelm Aegis intercept capacity, degraded by the modified software sitting inside the fire control processor. A well-designed trap, built around exact intelligence about the strike group's defensive architecture, designed to fit the sabotage inside the system's performance parameters like a key cut for a specific lock.
They had also assumed that no one would find the key before the lock was turned. They were wrong.
The decision made by the Office of Naval Intelligence and the National Security Council was not the obvious one. The obvious decision was to arrest the engineer, push a clean patch to the software, and stand the fleet down. Safe. Logical. Also the decision that would tell Iran their operation had been discovered. They would recall the submarines, stand down the missile brigades, disperse the fast attack squadrons, disappear back into the noise. And 6 months later, 12 months later, they would try again with a different contractor, a different network, a different line of code buried in a different certified patch.
The decision was to let the trap close.
Operation Pale Falcon was authorized at the highest levels of the chain of command. The carrier strike group would continue operating as if nothing had changed. Its communications maintained the same patterns. Its movements followed the scheduled patrol route. From every Iranian collection platform watching the strike group in the days before the attack window, the picture was identical to the one Iran needed to see. On the inside, everything was different. The Aegis software modification was neutralized without being removed. The technical team at Dahlgren pushed a masked counter-modification into the system through a secondary maintenance channel that left no trace in the contractor's access logs. The counter-modification wrapped the reweighting logic in a monitoring envelope that documented every activation in real time, while simultaneously ensuring the fire control processor received clean, unlagged track data. The radar would perform at full specification. The sabotage would believe it was working. The fire control system would know otherwise. The submarine threat was handled with a precision that was almost elegant. 2 Virginia-class attack submarines operating in the Gulf of Oman were immediately retasked when ONI correlated the Iranian Kilo-class movement patterns with the confirmed strike timeline. They altered course. They reduced speed. They went to full acoustic silencing protocols and began a systematic prosecution of the Iranian boats, using passive sonar techniques that left no signature the Iranians could detect. Over 4 days, working in complete silence, both U.S. submarines localized all 3 Kilo-class boats and established firm, continuously updated prosecution contacts. They did not maneuver aggressively. They did not communicate. They waited. The carrier's surface screen was augmented without creating any external profile change detectable to Iranian collection assets. 2 additional Aegis destroyers were redirected from separate operating areas under cover of a routine logistics coordination story. Their communications described a scheduled fuel replenishment and maintenance availability period at a regional partner port. They did not go to port. They took up screening positions that extended the outer engagement envelope on the exact vectors from which Iranian ballistic missiles were expected to arrive, operating under emissions control protocols that suppressed any radar signature that could indicate a change in the defensive geometry. A land-based terminal high-altitude area defense battery in the region was placed on enhanced readiness and integrated into the carrier strike group's Aegis fire control network through encrypted tactical data links. The THAAD battery's communications continued to report routine maintenance status. The defensive architecture facing the Iranian strike was categorically different from the one Iran's planners had designed their attack against. NSA collection against the IRGC cyber command node that had managed the sabotage operation was intensified in the final days before the strike window. Every communication out of that node was intercepted. The identities of every individual with access to the operational strike planning were documented and cross-referenced against existing intelligence holdings. The financial networks used to fund both the contractor recruitment and the strike logistics were mapped to their full extent. The intelligence being generated was not being used to stop the attack. It was being used to ensure that when the attack came and failed, every individual responsible for building it would be completely and permanently accounted for. The engineer in the Pacific Northwest had no awareness that he was under around-the-clock surveillance. He continued his normal work routine. He made no unusual calls. He sent no encrypted messages. He made no preparations to leave. He had been told by his handlers that once the patch was deployed, his role was finished. He had been told there would be no further contact. He had been told that the operational security of the network ensured he would never be connected to what followed. He had believed all of it because people recruited for single-scope technical operations and paid in careful increments and told they are protected, always believe it, right up until the moment they are not. On the morning of the strike window, he drove to work on his normal schedule. He scanned his badge at the facility entrance. He walked to his desk. He opened his workstation. At 9:47 in the morning, special agents from the FBI Counterintelligence Division arrested him at his workstation. Simultaneously, agents executed federal warrants at 3 separate locations across 2 states, detaining 2 additional individuals connected to the financial network. A 4th individual, the director of the Arizona consulting firm that had served as the funding conduit, was arrested at his residence. 4 minutes after the last arrest was confirmed to the operational command cell, the carrier strike group's tactical network received a single authenticated message from Fleet Cyber Command transmitted over a compartmented channel. 2 words: trap set.
The Iranian attack commenced that afternoon.
The first indication was acoustic, detected not by any surface ship but by the passive sonar arrays of the 2 Virginia-class submarines that had been holding prosecution contacts for 96 hours. Both boats detected simultaneous changes in the propulsion signatures of all 3 Kilo-class submarines within a 30-second window, speed increasing toward attack approach, depth decreasing toward weapon firing threshold, acoustic indicators consistent with torpedo tube flooding and outer door preparation. The U.S. submarine commanders did not wait for weapons in the water. They had firing solutions refined over 4 days of silent prosecution. The order to engage had been pre-delegated to both commanding officers from the moment the strike window opened and the Iranian boats began their attack sequence. All 3 Iranian Kilo-class submarines were destroyed within 4 minutes of their weapon system activation. None of them fired. None of them had any indication they had been under continuous prosecution since the moment they dropped off the surface tracking baseline. They had been followed in silence, tracked in silence, and killed in silence. No acoustic signature reached the IRGC Naval Command node that might have warned anyone that the submarine phase of the strike had been eliminated before it began. The first ballistic missile launches from Khuzestan were detected by space-based early warning assets 6 minutes after the last Iranian submarine was destroyed. 41 missiles, multiple warhead configurations, multiple simultaneous launch points across the province to complicate intercept geometry, trajectories calculated to saturate the engagement envelope of the carrier strike group Iran believed it was attacking.
Iran was not attacking the screen it had planned against.
The augmented defensive architecture engaged simultaneously and without hesitation. Fire control solutions were distributed across all 4 Aegis ships and the THAAD battery in real time. The first interceptors launched at maximum engagement range, well beyond what Iran's saturation calculations had factored into the strike design. The fire control processor operated without the 0.3-second lag the modified prioritization code had been designed to introduce. The counter-modification had wrapped the compromised layer and was passing clean data to the engagement system throughout, exactly as it had been programmed to do 11 days earlier in a test facility in Virginia. The monitoring envelope logged every single activation of the reweighting sabotage throughout the engagement. 37 separate attempts by the compromised code to introduce its delay into the ballistic track handoff process. 37 instances of the counter-modification neutralizing the attempt and passing uncontaminated data to the fire control processor. Every activation, every suppression. A complete, forensically admissible record of the sabotage code operating exactly as its designers intended, against a fire control system that had been shielded from its effects before the first Iranian missile was ever launched. 41 missiles entered the engagement envelope. 41 missiles were intercepted. Not one reached terminal approach against any vessel in the strike group. The IRGC fast attack flotilla that sortied from northern Gulf bases as part of the coordinated surface phase encountered the extended destroyer screen before closing to effective range. Electronic warfare suites jammed targeting systems. Anti-ship missiles were employed in a coordinated surface engagement lasting 18 minutes. The flotilla ceased to exist as a tactical force before it fired a weapon. Coastal defense missile batteries on the Iranian coastline that attempted to contribute launch packages to the saturation picture were struck by long-range air-to-surface weapons carried by naval aviation assets that had been holding at altitude outside Iranian radar coverage for 3 hours before the strike window opened. Each battery was struck within 40 seconds of its first active radar emission. None completed a launch sequence. The entire engagement lasted 22 minutes from the first submarine kill to the destruction of the last coastal battery. The carrier never maneuvered defensively. Not a single ship in the strike group sustained damage. Not a single sailor was injured. The Aegis combat system logged a perfect intercept record across the complete ballistic track picture. The fire control solution had not introduced a millisecond of processing delay throughout an engagement involving 41 simultaneous tracks. The compromised software layer had attempted to do exactly what it had been designed to do. It had failed completely. The aftermath was managed with the same precision as the operation itself. The public statement described a defensive engagement in the northern Persian Gulf in which Navy forces defeated a large-scale, unprovoked Iranian attack. It noted devastating losses across Iranian naval, missile, and coastal defense forces. All U.S. personnel returned safely. The United States had been fully prepared. It said nothing about the software modification, nothing about the contractor, nothing about the 4 arrests, nothing about the submarines. The classified damage assessment took 8 months to complete. It documented the full scope of IRGC intelligence penetration into the defense contractor ecosystem. It identified 17 separate individuals in contact with the IRGC financial network over the preceding 3 years. It recommended a comprehensive restructuring of Aegis software maintenance security protocols implemented fleet-wide over 18 months. The forensic record of the monitoring envelope, documenting 37 activations of the sabotage code during the engagement, was used in the prosecution and in classified briefings to Allied navies. The engineer entered a guilty plea 22 months after his arrest. His cooperation disrupted 2 additional IRGC intelligence networks operating inside U.S. defense contractor organizations, neither of which had previously been known to exist. The consulting firm director was convicted at trial. The IRGC Cyber Command node that had directed the operation was destroyed 6 months after the engagement in an event described by Iranian state media as a facility malfunction. The individuals documented by NSA collection during the final planning phase were not publicly named. Their unavailability for further IRGC operations was noted as a significant degradation of Iranian technical collection capacity. The carrier strike group completed its deployment and returned to home port on schedule.
The guided missile cruiser, whose technician flagged the 0.3-second anomaly, received a unit commendation. The language was deliberately vague. The technician was promoted ahead of his peer group. His division officer was selected for department head school. Neither of them was ever told the full scope of what that diagnostic number had set in motion. What they had done was find a key cut in a contractor facility in the Pacific Northwest, funded through a Cyprus shell company, delivered through a Dubai recruitment planned by an intelligence service that had spent years building toward a single moment of operational surprise. A key designed to be invisible, to pass every check, to sit inside a certified signed software patch and wait. It was found by a 22-year-old petty officer on his 65th diagnostic cycle who noticed that a number was wrong by 0.3 of a second and wrote it down. The summary section of the Pale Falcon damage assessment reads as follows: 14 months of contractor network penetration by a hostile foreign intelligence service. 4 domestic arrests across 2 states. 3 Iranian Kilo-class submarines destroyed before weapons release. 41 ballistic missiles intercepted. 0 coalition casualties. 0 ships damaged. 0 weapons reaching terminal approach against any vessel in the carrier strike group. 1 software modification. 0.3 seconds of processing lag per update cycle. 37 activation attempts during the engagement. 37 neutralizations. 1 anomaly flagged on a routine diagnostic by a 22-year-old technician on his 65th diagnostic run who noticed that a number looked wrong. That anomaly was supposed to be the margin, the invisible crack in the American defensive architecture that a strike large enough and fast enough and precisely timed enough would find and slip through and turn into something catastrophic and irreversible. The people who designed it understood the Aegis system at a level of technical sophistication that required years of access and resources and patience. They had built a failure mode that should never have been found. They had built it inside a system watched by people who understood that in naval warfare, there is no anomaly too small to investigate, no number too marginal to question, no diagnostic result too minor to report. Naval intelligence does not always begin with satellites and intercepts and multi-source fusion analysis. Sometimes it begins on a ship in the Persian Gulf at 6 in the morning with a young technician running a diagnostic he has run 64 times before, looking at a number that is off by 0.3 of a second and deciding that 0.3 of a second is worth writing down and taking upstairs. That was the margin. Between an ambush and an annihilation. Between 41 successful intercepts and 41 missiles hitting ships. Between a carrier strike group that came home and one that didn't. 0.3 seconds.
1 anomaly. 1 report.
The fleet survived.